Okay, so today we are looking at DMA 70. We're working on section 4. Section 4 is where we are adding and subtracting rational expressions with different, add, subtract with different denominators. So this should remind you and give you a flashback to DMA 20 where you're working with fractions where your denominators are different. And what are the things that you need to do when you have different denominators? Okay, so as we get started, I want to start with a very simple example working with whole numbers. Let's say we want to add 2/3 and we want to add 3/4. We want to add these two fractions together. The first thing that we have to do is to find a least multiple. The least common multiple for both of these, we're going to do 3 times 4, and we would use the value 12 for the least common denominator. The next thing we need to do is to make equivalent expressions. When you make equivalent expressions, you're going to use the least common denominator. And this is a reflection of what we did in the last section 3. We had a whole skill practice on finding common multiples. Then we had a whole skill practice section on making equivalent expressions. So what happens is we're going to take 2/3, we're going to multiply it by get a denominator of 12. And we're going to take 3/4, multiply it by something to get a denominator of 12. And as you recall, you can always multiply any fraction by 1 and have an equivalent expression. So here I would say 3 times 4 gives me 12, so my 1 whole is 4/4. 2 times 4 gives me a numerator of 8, so 2/3 is equivalent to 8/12. 4 times 3 gives me 12, so my 1 whole is 3/3. 3 times 3 gives me 9, so 3/4 is equivalent to 9/12. So what we're doing now is we're adding 8 and 9. 8 plus 9 is going to give us 17/12. And there's no common factor here that can be reduced. But if after we make equivalent expressions, we would add or subtract. Let me make note, the new numerators, and then we simplify if possible. Okay, so that's what we're going to do, but in our examples and our problems, we're not going to have, we're going to have not just whole numbers, we're going to have different values for the denominators that'll be in the form of expressions. Okay, so let's start with, let's say we have 2a plus 3 over a squared plus a minus 2. And we're going to subtract 5 over 3a minus 3. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is find the least common multiple. In order to do that, I'm going to need to take this denominator and factor it to 2 terms. That's going to give me an a minus 1, no, excuse me, an a minus 1 and an a plus 2. For this one, I'm going to factor out a 3, and that leaves me with an a minus 1. So my least common multiple, we have a 3. Both of them have an a minus 1, and the other one has an a plus 2. So we find our least common multiple. Now we're going to make equivalent expressions. As we make equivalent expressions, I'm going to take my 2a plus 3 over my a minus 1, a plus 2. I'm going to set it up just like I did a moment ago, give myself some space here, put the least common multiple on this side. Just have to go off, and I'm going to write this as a -5 because there was a minus there. We have a 3 and an A minus 1. So this is just like our skill practice that we did in our last section. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to find, I have the A minus 1 and I have the A plus 2. What I'm missing is the 3. So my one whole here is going to be 3. I have to distribute that 3 with both of these. So 3 times 2A is 6A. 3 times 3 is 9. So this is going to be my new numerator for the first one, 6A plus 9. On my second one here, I have a 3 here and here. I have an A minus 1. What I'm missing is the A plus 2. So this negative 5, I'm going to distribute with both of those. So negative 5 times A is minus 5A. Negative 5 times positive 2 is negative 10. So up here, my second new numerator is minus 5A minus 10. So we make equivalent expressions. Then what we do is we add or subtract two numerators. So what we have here is we have, let me do a different color. So what I have is 6A minus 5A. That's going to leave me with A. And my 9 minus 10 is going to give me a negative 1. That's my new numerator. My denominator is 3A minus 1 over A plus 2. Okay, so all of that got combined, and that's what we have here. And after we have added and subtracted, then what we would do is simplify if possible. So in this case, we have an A minus 1 both here and here that cancel. When things cancel, they cancel and become a 1. My denominator is going to be 3A plus 2, and you have to remember to put that understood 1 where it canceled in the numerator. Okay, let's do another. Okay, let's say we have, for this one, let's say we have 3B over B minus 5 plus 15 over 5 minus B. We need to find the least common multiple. Now this is in the correct order, but notice the order is wrong here. So this should be negative B plus 5. We don't start with a negative, so we factor out a negative 1. Negative and positive is negative. A negative times a negative is a positive. So my least common multiple, they both have a B minus 5, but the second one also had a negative 1. Now, since this is the common denominator, this numerator is going to stay the same. We're not going to change the 15. However, the first one, the 3B over B minus 5, we're going to have it match the least common denominator. So we're going to have to multiply top and bottom by negative 1. So that's going to give me a negative 3B when I distribute here. When I multiply, that gives me a negative 3B. So what I have is negative 3B plus 15 over this. My next step is, in order to simplify, I can factor out of the numerator a negative 3. That's going to leave me with a B and a 5. Let's check our sign though. Negative and positive is negative. Negative times what would be a negative gives me the positive. Then I have on the bottom negative 1 and then still the B minus 5. I look to see, can I cancel anything out? And I can. The B minus 5s both cancel. And I end up with negative 3 over negative 1. I do need to simplify that. That can simplify and reduce to become positive 3. And then that would be your final answer. Okay, let's try one more. Let's say we have 3 over 2x squared plus x minus 2x over 6x plus 3. Okay, for this one, we should have to go through all of the steps. Factor this denominator, we factor out an x, and that leaves me with 2x plus 1. On this side, I can factor out a 3, and that leaves me with 2 and 1. My least common multiple has to have a 3 and an x and the parenthesis 2x plus 1. So for each of these, I now need to come up with my new numerators. Each of these are going to be multiplied by a value of 1 to get the least common denominator. Okay, so let's see what we're going to multiply by. Okay, so this one has the x and it has the 2x plus 1. What it was missing was the 3 over 3. 3 times 3 gives me a new numerator of 9. This one has the 3, it has the 2x plus 1, it was missing that single x. So here, negative 2x times x is negative 2x squared. So my first one is a 9 minus 2x squared. In order to put it in the correct order, however, we would write it with the negative 2x squared first, and then plus 9 over 3x, 2x plus 1. I would look at this and see, does 2 and 9 have a common factor? It cannot be factored or simplified any further, so that would end up being your final solution. So that's what you're doing in this section. So what you need to do is to factor denominators to find the least common multiple. Then you need to make equivalent expressions. You then add or subtract the new numerators. And then last, you simplify if possible. So you're doing the skill practices from section 3. Finding the least common multiples, making the equivalent expressions, then do your basic addition, subtraction, and then simplifying if you can at that point.